Hi, I'm Sherry, and this is my channel. And I gotta get a tripod. Um, I'm just chilling and relaxing, and that's why I'm kind of like not in the best posture. Um, my friend Genevieve, Tales from the Spectrum, had encouraged me to read to you guys. Do you want to learn about the fentanyl crisis? I don't know. You said yes. Oh, sorry, a friend of mine just texted me. I'll look at it later. So yeah, the thing that was really confusing when I started learning about the fentanyl, is that they already knew since like the early 1900s. What? They knew. Whoa, that's way too close. The effects of the opioid epidemic in the US have caused far-reaching and unprecedented damage to our society, economy, and the healthcare system. In the early 1990s, the United States began witnessing a sharp increase in opioid prescriptions, which led to unprecedented abuse, addiction, and death rates from opioid overdoses. This part we know. Since then, I mean, like us, layperson, since then, more than 1 million people have died from a drug overdose, with a majority, 645,000 people, dying from opioid overdoses. Opioids are a category of drugs that can be legally manufactured, distributed, and prescribed by a physician and some other healthcare providers for severe and chronic pain. If you've ever known somebody who has suffered with severe and or chronic pain, it's horrible. I used to have somebody close to me in my life that I cared very much for and lived with chronic pain, and there really was not much they could do for them. So I've seen it, you know. It's a terrible thing, and I'd like to learn, honestly. I'll get to it in a second. I'll tell you where my question is. I'll get there. So back to what I was reading. So opioids are a category of drugs that can be legally manufactured, distributed, and prescribed by a physician and some other healthcare providers for severe chronic pain. However, over the last decade, the U.S. has seen a growing number of lethal and non-lethal overdoses from illegally manufactured opioids, specifically fentanyl. Fentanyl is scary shit. That should have never got out. Nobody should ever make it, period. It was designed for people who's had surgery, people with severe pain. It's not supposed to be for anyone to use lightly, for hospital use only. You know what I mean? Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid and is one of the most potent opioids available. Yeah. You can just die from that shit. One use. You don't use it right. Come on, that's crazy. I still don't understand. It is legally prescribed as an anesthetic for severe pain. Because of its potency and being cheaper and easier to manufacture, fentanyl has quickly replaced heroin in the illegal and underground economy. So I can definitely see why people who are selling illegal drugs would do that. You know, it's a business like any other business. If it's cheaper, you're going to do that. Since the cases of overdoses from fentanyl continue to grow at an alarming rate, it is important to understand the role fentanyl now plays in the opioid epidemic and in substance abuse. In addition, as healthcare professionals and members of the community, it is critical to be able to recognize an overdose and how to properly respond to it to save lives. So here I am doing this video. I'm just recording myself, reading material I have to study. And I thought, you know, maybe Jen's right. This could really help people. I don't know who would see this from my little channel, but Yeah, and I do have to be time cognizant because my phone shuts it off. So it actually has cut a couple of my videos in half, and I have to do multiple. I don't like that. So far we're 5 minutes in. So far, so good. Continuing objectives, what they want me to learn. Explain the causes of the opioid epidemic. This is complicated. Well, kind of. In the United States, compare the different types of narcotics and opioids. List the different scheduling category. I can talk today. List the different scheduling categories for controlled substances. Describe the legal and illegal use of fentanyl. Discuss the dangers of illegally manufactured fentanyl. Dude, it's no joke. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, sorry. Explain what polysubstance use and its role in fentanyl abuse. Basically, like a lot of shit's laced with it, and you think you're getting something mild, and it might have that in there. Explain what polysubstance use is and its role in fentanyl abuse. Summarize the goals of harm reduction and provide examples. The goals are to save lives. You see somebody who has overdosed and you recognize the symptoms. They're basically saying, I don't care who you are. If you're around, if you recognize it, if there's Narcan, give it to them. Save a life. Don't do drugs, boys and girls. If there's any young ones, please don't even start with these. No. When my parents were young, like in the 70s or whatever, they had drugs. They had LSD and stuff, but you didn't die from the first use of it. Yeah. When I was a little girl in the 80s, they did the Hugs Not Drugs, and they had this, and they say that it didn't work, it just was scaring people. But I'll tell you what, when I was little, a police officer would come with, a trunk. Who knows? This probably wasn't even real, but there'd be different white powders in there, and they basically scared the bejesus out of us. I never in my life wanted to try it. It worked. On me, anyway. I'm like, And I remember seeing a commercial, and, go back far enough in the past, and heroin was a thing back then, too. And then it wasn't for a long time. But they would have this commercial with this lady with this glamorous hair and her makeup, and she was sitting at this beautiful, like, Hollywood-style vanity mirror, and this says, oh, yeah, heroin is glamorous. And she takes off her wig. She takes off her makeup. My God, she had all these wrinkles, like her skin looked horrible. She took out her teeth. By the time she was done, you never want. And that was regular heroin. I mean, the stuff that they make today, even before fentanyl, was stronger than that. So I don't understand it. I'm very grateful that I never, very, very grateful. Maybe part of it was the time I grew up. Maybe part of it is that the people around me, we had been sheltered, I guess. In like the 80s and 90s in high schools and stuff. I know that there was some drug use, but just nothing like this stuff. Hopefully kids aren't getting a hold of that. So anyway, rambling, sorry. Understanding the opioid epidemic. So here's where it gets interesting. This is my question. We know opioids have been opioids. I can talk. We know opioids have been used for centuries to I need some coffee. We know they've been used for centuries to treat pain. In the mid-1800s, opioids were used to treat the pain in wounded soldiers during the Civil War. Physicians prescribed opium gum, which was dried opium poppy, laudanum, which is a combination of opium and alcohol. For anyone who likes horror movies or semi-horror movies, the movie that is it Winchester? The Winchester Mystery House. I can't remember if it's in San Francisco. People on the West Coast will know more about that. But Mrs. Winchester going back to the earlier 1900s. During the Victorian days, they were really obsessed with, well, it was the thing, spiritualism and having seances and stuff. And she was convinced by a supposed psychic, I don't know, that all these spirits were mad because she was I know this is getting off topic, but supposedly, like, all these spirits are mad because of all the people that died from Winchester firearms, which is where the family fortune came from. Winchester, the Winchester family that developed the company, Winchester Firearms. And she had lost her husband and her child, and so she went into mourning and never really came out. And she made a really strange house. And sometimes I wonder if that house is, like, I feel like our environment is a reflection of our state of mind, right? So I have ADHD, I have a cluttered mind, I have a cluttered space. And to be organized in your space, you have to have organized thoughts, and I'm working on it. Also, people with depression, and if you ever watch those shows with hoarders, I'm getting away from the fentanyl. Yeah, they've usually gone through some kind of trauma or have some mental illness. So I feel like, and this is just speculating, that perhaps her depression and mental illness from that trauma, and then the suggestion at a very vulnerable time in her life by somebody claimed to be a psychic, made her really afraid of spirits. So she created this crazy house with, like, doorways that went to the ceiling, or, stairs that went into the ceiling, and you go into rooms. If you open a door, you might fall. So it was to trick the spirits. But anyway, why did I get into that? Oh, you go watch that movie. There's a scene in the beginning of the movie where this doctor that Mrs. Winchester wanted to come there, he had lost his wife, and in his grief and being a human being wanting comfort, he had some ladies of the night visiting him, and he was, having drugs with them. And if I had lost my wife, and I think it was from mental illness, if I was in his shoes, I might feel that way. But go watch that movie, because they are indulging in an early 1900s opium, a drug called laudanum, which is what I'm reading about here. So yeah, they would take this tincture, this long thing, and they would drink it. And that was a combination of alcohol. I'd be really curious to know what kind of alcohol they used. If it was grain alcohol, if there was a specific kind. This is really interesting. So I've gotten way off topic here. 13 minutes? Okay. But that's crazy. Just seeing those vintage bottles was very cool. I love vintage stuff and learning about history. Maybe we can do that soon. So physicians back during the Civil War, sorry, getting back on track, they prescribed opium gum, which was dried opium poppy. So they must have taken pieces of the flower, dried it, and then just chewed it, and it wouldn't be like gum how you and I would think of it. It would be something you could chew on, and it would release the medicine from the plant. I always feel like it's better to get medicine from a plant. And just because something is natural, don't think that it's necessarily safe, because poisons come from plants too. So just because something's natural, do your research before you start taking, like, herbs and stuff. We can talk about that soon too. There are interactions between certain herbs that you'll see at the drugstore and medication. But anyway, the thing that was interesting to me that I keep getting stuck on in this article and studying about the fentanyl crisis, when they go way back in the history and they start right here, and you can tell, like, in the beginning, so they were using it on, well, maybe it wasn't the beginning, but that's where they're starting here on the time scale. So they're giving it to soldiers in the Civil War, which makes sense because they were, that was back in history. They didn't have a lot of stuff. I don't even think they knew about bacteria yet. So I think that might have been before then. Was it the Civil War? Anybody knows about, learning about bacteria and stuff? I can't, it's foggy to me, like, um, specifically when in history. I seem to remember it was like during this period. So let me know when that was, because they would just take dirty saws, and if they had to, you know, amputate a limb for a soldier who got shot in the field, they just used saw, and they didn't clean it. Thank God we live now, right? So yeah, so during the Civil War, they had three kinds of medications that were opiums. They had opium gum, which was the dried opium poppy. Laudanum, which I just mentioned, that's in the beginning of the Winchester movie. Go see it. I know it didn't do well, but if you like things that have a flair for history and you don't really have high expectations of it scaring you, if you like artistry of that part, you will enjoy that. That's kind of neat. And it is kind of like eerie and spooky, and there's some good scenes. I do like some movies we can discuss sometime. Let me know. Do you like horror movies or scary movies? There's some psychological movies and stories that I would love to talk about because that's a lot of fun. I'm not talking much about fentanyl, am I? So, here's where it gets closer. Opium gum, laudanum, and morphine to treat the pain of gunshot wounds and other injuries. But opioids were also prescribed for diarrhea and coughs. I'm really curious about that, like how it would. I know it's a pain medication, and I know that it does make you constipated. Sorry if it's TMI, but when you learn about medication, I used to be in nursing school, and you learn about pharmacology, and those medications, they constipate you. So if you get diarrhea, it makes sense that back in the day, before they really knew how bad this was, they would use it for that. And it's interesting they used it for coughs because it was also mentioned in another part of this article. In 1898, so that was the mid-1800s during the Civil War. And then going forward to 1898, Bayer, see, I didn't know how far back Bayer went. That's really interesting to me. Bayer began marketing and commercializing heroin to the public as a pain reliever and cough suppressant. Although deemed a wonder drug, which it probably seemed that way to them, right? They're like, wow, this really helps a lot with pain, and we have people who are suffering. This is great. We need this. They didn't know yet. It was soon discovered to be very addictive. So right at this point, it's almost like they're naive. And this is the first time me learning about this timeline in history. So I'm not very super knowledgeable. I'm just going on what is being taught here. So it'd be really interesting if there's any history people out there, people who understand pharmacology and the history of medications. That is very cool. Check out, give a shout out to, I can't remember the name of their page. Adam, I can't remember if it's just his name, but he always does these videos that says, I am neurotypical, my wife's neurodivergent. She has this, they have this podcast called the Poisoner's Almanac. It is awesome, very cool, very, very cool. Just, it's not like, oh, let's go learn about poisons because we want to do something bad. No. It's learning about the history of medication and different things and how they realize that some things are poisonous and how the implications in history and all of the factual information of how it affects your body. And she used to work, I believe she was a nurse too. She was a nurse. I didn't become one. I was in school and then we had to move. So, but yeah, cool. Very, very, very cool. I'm going to reach out to them and let them know I'm mentioning them. I don't know if you guys will see this, but back to what I'm reading. I think I'm going to have to break this up into 3 parts. There's only a few pages, but I just got through one. Don't worry, I'm not going to get hung up like that as I keep going. By early 19... This is helping me a lot. Just, talking to you about this helps me a lot because if I can explain it out loud, it helps me to retain the information a lot better than if I'm sitting here blindly just reading it. So it helps me, even if nobody watches this. And, I'll try a few of these. And if people aren't interested, I can always just like take them down. So I haven't really lost anything except for storage space in my phone. By the early 1900s, now at this point, so this is going from mid 1800s into the early 1900s. Now they're realizing it's addictive. Now they're dealing with the aftermath of all these people being sick and hurt by it. By the early 1900s, heroin addiction rates were undeniable, and physicians tried to avoid treating patients with any opioids. So they were in it. They were seeing it. They were seeing the damage it was doing. So that's why I didn't understand, like, going forward a few decades, why are they that detached? So if something doesn't happen in your generation and you don't see it physically yourself, that you might think, hey, we don't use this medication. Maybe if we're careful, we can use it and it'll be fine. That's my question. I'm very interested. And from what I was reading here, and then also some of the thoughts and attitudes in the medical establishment that are important to understand and are important, they are real problems they have to find solutions for. And I just don't know if they were desperate and this is all they had. Because they do consider pain to be your fifth vital sign now. It's very, very important. And the reason is more than just the patient's suffering, right? So for all those people who aren't in taking any kind of medical classes or know anything about the human body and physiology and your health, when your body is in pain, it's an inflammation response. So your stress level goes up, probably your blood pressure goes up. It actually has a physiological effect on your body. And depending on what is going on and why you're in the hospital, and some people might be close to death or could die, having somebody in full on pain, let's say they were in a car accident and they have severe injuries, you have to knock that pain out. Because if you don't, in some situations, somebody could die, because they're so close and their body's in shock. They're not stable and they're trying to stabilize somebody. You have to get rid of the pain. You can't. And it's suffering. So up into the modern day, and I'm going to end it here. There's only a couple more sentences, and then it goes to the modern day, and then I can do the next one. So by the early 1900s, heroin addiction rates were undeniable, and physicians tried to avoid treating patients with any opioids at all. Heroin then became illegal in 1924. So we started at the Civil War, mid 1800s. Then Bayer is promoting it as a wonder drug, right? And that was 1898. So that's like 50 years of them using it. And I don't think it was widespread use before then. They were just mostly using it on soldiers, I think. And in some situations. But then it was really, it was marketed. Wow, that's so crazy that Bayer was back then. They were marketing and commercializing heroin. Because it wasn't illegal yet. It was just like cocaine used to be used as a medication before it became illegal. So as you're learning about things like this, put that in the back of your mind to look through that perspective. So by World War II and over the next several decades, thinking about pain management, prescribing habits of opioids changed. I'm thinking that, World War II was such a huge part of the entire world, and there was so much stuff that went on between the early 1900s until the 1950s that maybe they forgot. And maybe the people who were doctors in the early 1900s, they weren't working as doctors anymore. They were retired or passed away. That was like the grandparents of the doctors, maybe. So by the time you get somewhere between the 50s to the 80s, it's going to cut me off soon. They started changing because now it's like they haven't had it anymore. And they're probably like, hey, we used to have this drug. Why don't we have it anymore? And you have a new generation of people. By the 1980s, several members of the medical and research community began publishing research papers and studies indicating that chronic pain was undermanaged and poorly treated. And like I said before, treating somebody's pain is extremely important. And we don't have a whole lot of options besides medication still. As a result, pain began to be considered the fifth vital sign. They teach you that in nursing school and in other medical. They did with me in my class. They're making it seem like they don't anymore, but they did. And then it comes to the next one. We'll talk about the 3 waves of the opioid epidemic in the next one. And I will see you. If you've enjoyed this, I hope you have. I love learning about human body and physiology and medicine and history and all of these things and what we can learn from them. I hope you enjoyed what I shared with you. And if you don't want to see another one, listen to another one, that's fine. But in the next one, I will continue to the modern day. See you guys later. Bye.